Welcome to the Soulful Sustainable Living podcast with Haley and Makayla, your go-to holistic healing and conscious living hacks.
If you didn't already know, Ashley, our podcast is called Soulful Sustainable Living, and we focus on holistic healing in all different aspects of life, sustainable building, and real estate. And Makayla is a specialist in holistic physical wellness. Do you want to talk a little bit just briefly about that? Introduce yourself. Ashley knows me a little bit professionally, but
Yeah. I like to say just on air, I run a brand called Heart and Home Connection. So I help people build legacy in their life through real estate investing and holistic healing. I'm a movement specialist and have been in the movement space for about 8 years now. And I run a coaching business as well that specializes in mental and emotional release work. So we're really passionate about merging our spaces together because so much comes from, we have our two homes. We have our physical home, which is our house, and then we have our body, right? And I think those two go hand in hand when you get into the non-toxic conversations, and why we're so excited to talk to you today about EMF and other ways to mitigate, or I want to say choose to build in a better way so that you can have wellness inside and out.
Yeah. I love that. That's why I was so attracted to you guys, because the mental piece is so important in the conversation when we start talking about avoidance and removal and all of that. So.
yeah. Ashley Spanovich is licensed by the National Council of Interior Design Qualifications, NCIDQ, lead general associate, a certified integrative nutrition health coach, and is currently certified as a certified passive house tradesperson, building biology environmental consultant, and electromagnetic radiation specialist. She's also pursuing a new build consultant with the International Institute of Building Biology and Ecology as well. She has been supporting clients and businesses directly through her business, Awakening Spaces, for the past 5 years, consulting on healthy, holistic living with construction and design projects. We are so honored to be speaking with Ashley today. Please welcome her to the podcast.
Ooh. Awesome. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
We're so happy to be talking to you today. So, Ashley, can you just start off by telling us what is building biology and what led you to pursue certifications from that organization specifically?
Yeah. So building biology is essentially the study and the science of healthy buildings. Building biology takes a little bit from passive house, from building science, from natural building, and it really just brings together a very holistic view of how to create a healthy home. And that might look like education on how to make your existing home healthier, how to reduce mold, any bacterial growth, electromagnetic radiation. But there's also a newer focus now on teaching people how to build communities in a healthy way, how to build homes in a healthy way, and even commercial spaces, and what we need to be thinking on a large scale and just creating healthier communities. And a lot of it is just bringing it back to the basics, honestly, which is really cool.
Well, where do you see, because as a realtor, I've seen houses that are 100 years old, and I've seen brand new homes. And where do you see this like general market moving? Do you think that more builders are going to be held have requirements or be held to like mandatory status when it comes to using healthier materials, or where's the industry moving?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing a push for low VOC and healthier materials in general, but it just skims the surface when it comes to what people are doing when they say they're healthy building. I think EMFs are totally left out of the conversation, especially when we start to consider the smart home movement and energy efficiency. But I really do think that healthy buildings are going to be the way of the future, because I see so many people who are becoming more and more sick from their environment. And I think that that's going to start to push designers and architects, because their clients are in demand and they want to see it done better. So that's going to push the designers, and the designers are going to hopefully push manufacturers. until it's just inevitable that we have to do better because it's just so unhealthy.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing, and I think why we're so passionate about this podcast and having you on here, is if we can educate the consumer, they can drive the industry. And I think that's really where it's going to come from, is when the supply isn't meeting the demand of what we need.
Exactly. And I love educating, because the last thing I want for anyone is to have to deal with mystery symptoms, unknowing for a long time, going doctor to doctor to doctor, being told that they're crazy, until they finally realize, oh my gosh, it was my environment.
Yeah. I just think environment plays such a bigger role than we are led to believe in our modern day society. And it's just so inspiring that there's professionals out there like you who are already doing this and leading the industry into the specifics about what isn't necessarily already talked about, like EMF and mold. So what is EMF? We've heard this in like you said, smart home movement or viral videos on the internet, but what does it actually mean, and why is it a threat to us as homeowners, as consumers, and people just interacting with this digital technology in today's society?
Yeah, so EMF stands for electromagnetic field or frequency. It could also be called EMR, so electromagnetic radiation, which actually kind of encompasses all types of EMF. There's 4 specific types that we look for in building biology and that we measure. There's magnetic field, which often when people say EMF, they think a magnetic field. But there's a magnetic field, there's an electric field, there's a radio frequency, and there's dirty electricity. And those are the 4 different types that we look into and we try to reduce our exposure to, because they're non-native EMFs. So there's a lot of healing frequencies that we get from nature, from the sun, from the earth. These magnetic fields are healing. What becomes harmful to us is the overexposure to non-native electromagnetic radiation from all of our devices, our cell phones, our computers, our TVs, these microphones, these cords, anything plugged into a wall, our building wiring, lighting. I mean, the list goes on. If you can think of it having a cord or a button, it is an electromagnetic field. It is creating some sort of EMR.
That is crazy. I mean, I just think I've talked about this a lot in some personal relationships where I just feel like we've innovated and constantly been just designing to think newer is better. And I think that this is such a great reminder that you said, like, the earth has healing frequencies, but everything that we're doing, new technology, is like the complete opposite of that. And just finding that duality, I guess. And to that question, or to that, it kind of leads me into another question. Can you like mitigate all EMF then from like using the earth, or like is there like an equation there where like, oh, if you spend this much time in nature, then like it kind of evens itself out, or how does that work?
So I don't know if there's actually some sort of equation, but absolutely, like, I truly believe that we are totally disconnecting ourselves from nature by making our lives easier in our homes. And we spend 90% of our time indoors. And so not only are we exposing ourselves to more and more non-native EMF, we're disconnecting ourselves from the sun, which is incredibly healing on a quantum level. And actually, the sun is what turns on all of our body's processes. So if we have digestive issues, if we have hormonal issues, it all starts with the sun. And seeing the sunlight first thing in the morning at sunrise is going to start to turn on those body's processes. So I don't know that there's like an exact equation, but I do know that we can't control everything, but what we can control is definitely making an effort to step outside of our homes and be more present with nature, but also doing the best that we can to actually remove the sources inside of our home. So there's going to be a balance there. And so on this conversation, it's really the fear can be toxic too, just like we were talking about earlier. And so it's really important to just do the best you can inside your home and not worry so much about what's outside your home, because you can't control that. And yes, we are getting exposed outside of our homes as well. So
it's one of those things where it's not going away. We can't sit here and say ban all technology, get rid of your smartphones. That's so unrealistic to think. So it's like, do the best with what you have and be mindful. I think just becoming aware that it is a problem, that maybe there's a more out of balance than maybe we've had in our past historically, and it's coming to terms with, you can't eliminate everything, but what can you do? And you do your best. So we have control over what goes into our body and what comes into our home. And that's why this conversation gets to be so powerful, because there's still so much you can do specifically in the home. What do you recommend? I mean, everything these days is smart. So you have a smart washer and dryer, you have a smart thermostat, you have your Apple Watch hooked to your Alexa in the kitchen. So where do you kind of draw the line?
Oh, well, I will tell you that and this doesn't have to do with healthy building at all, but the biggest exposure that we all have, our cell phone. 1,000%. So our cell phones emit about, we'll just say 450,000 microwatts. And ideally, per building biology standards, a safe space would be under 10.
Oh.
So think about this, and we put it in our bras when we're running and we have no pockets. I mean, right up to our body, or we put it in our pockets, like just next to very sensitive areas of our body. Our heads, we sleep next to it at night. We never turn it off. We never disconnect. So think about that before we think about anything else. And this is so easy to control. And this isn't even on the conversation of doom scrolling and overconsumption of information and the toxic, burden that we get from just the availability of information. This is like physical frequencies that are actually impacting our health. And so that's like the number one thing I would recommend if someone's new to this conversation. Be very mindful of distancing your phone from your body and your person, because distance is our friend. Even if we can't turn it off, distance is going to help. But if we're thinking about sleeping and having a healthy sleeping space, we really either want it totally out of our bedroom, or we want it turned off, or we want it in a Faraday bag so that we can still use the alarm if someone doesn't want to get a battery operated alarm clock. Or we want to have it on with Bluetooth turned off and on airplane mode with cellular turned off. And I do have some resources, I think, on my Instagram page, if we scroll back, just of how, like, what that needs to look like and what those settings are on an Apple. But you could probably YouTube that for any phone. But we now have Find Your iPhone and all of these other things that are going to be emitting a signal even when your phone's off. So we do have to be conscious that unless we're using like a Faraday bag or something, we're still going to be getting exposed to some of that frequency. That's the first thing I would say for anybody, and really considering your laptop as well, your Kindle, your iPad, all of those things, if they're not turned off, could be emitting a field. I just did a evaluation of someone's home, and we couldn't figure out what it was, and their Kindle was emitting pretty high levels, like up in the 100,000s.
So we're swimming in it.
We're swimming in it, but we have control. If we're not using the device, we should definitely be turning it off. Turning it off is probably the safest thing you can do, without putting it into an actual Faraday bag, which you can get online from lots of different companies. But putting in a Faraday bag, if you don't want to worry about the settings.
Can you spell that? Faraday? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Faraday. F-A-R-A-D-Y.
Okay.
Might have 2 R's, so I hope things I think it's just 1 R. But you can go to, I love this company, Tech Wellness, because they make like better looking EMF protection devices, and they're all about safer technology. How can we be safer with using this? Not, oh my gosh, avoid it, it's the devil, but how can we be safe using it in our modern world?
Yeah, this conversation just goes hand in hand with controlling our environment in the home, but it's directly impacting our personal health and safety. And setting the precedent too, where this conversation so much when it comes to holistic living and non-toxic swaps is great for us. And then I think about our children and the next generation and the precedent that you're setting for them in the home. And when you're not chained to your technology, you're giving them permission to learn to live without it as well, which I think can be so powerful.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that you guys are saying. I think that this is just such an interesting, like, newer thing that we are just now becoming a little bit more mainstream aware of in terms of additional toxins and exposures. And I just love that there's like someone like you who's specializing in this, because I think so much is like, oh, what do I really do? Or what can I really do? And then it just becomes something that kind of gets pushed off into the back burner. But I love that you have resources and that you're kind of working on this as one of your main pieces. Before we get too far into the resources, which I do want to cover, I want you to go back to those 4 different types of EMF and maybe give some examples of like what differentiates dirty electricity from a standard EMF field. Or I'm clearly not saying the correct terminology, but if you could go through that and give us some examples so that us, here in this room, but then also audience can start to understand and pinpoint what that looks like in their home.
Yeah. So the first, we'll talk about radio frequencies because that's the type of EMF that I was talking about when I'm talking about our cell phones and our laptops. That's the radio frequency is Bluetooth, is Wi-Fi, is anything smart. Anything that's going to have that smart feature, that's going to have a radio frequency component to it. Like you said earlier, washing machines, gas stoves are now smart. What else?
Really, every appliance. You can get a smart fridge. You can get a smart microwave, a smart coffee pot. I've seen it all.
Everything. And really, on this topic, just know that there's a ton of things out there saying that they protect you from EMF. Well, most of the time, and I'd say 90% of those gizmos or gadgets or whatever they are out there saying that they're protecting you from EMF are talking about radio frequency.
Okay.
And I've tried a lot of them out and they don't actually do anything. So I will say that I wouldn't buy into any of that stuff, really. I just wouldn't waste your money. I think that there's better investments. I'm sure we'll go into that in a little bit. But the second EMF I mentioned was magnetic fields. And a magnetic field is present when a device is plugged in and turned on. It has to be actively, it has to have active current running to it in order for a magnetic field to be present. But let's say mostly the magnetic fields are going to come from anything that has like a motor. So you might see it in an air purifier has a magnetic field component. Our TVs might have a magnetic field component. Dehumidifiers, ceiling fans, exhaust fans. We could also have wiring errors on our building wiring that could cause really, really bad magnetic fields. And again, that is going to be present when there is current running to whatever that is. The next one is electric field, and that is present even if a device is turned off. So right now, the TV is probably plugged in. We're still getting exposed to some electric field from that being plugged into the wall. Also, Romex wiring, it's like a plastic jacketed wiring. It's very standard. It's very common, especially in residential. In commercial, not so much. They usually use MC cabling, which actually shields the electric field. That emits an electric field as well. Electric baseboard heat is another one that I see a very strong electric field coming from. Dirty electricity is essentially, it can come from things like solar panels, pool pumps. It's essentially the backfeed of electricity onto our building wiring. It's probably the least common and least understood in terms of its health impacts, but building biology always talks about the precautionary principles. So even if we don't necessarily know what, it's doing, it's working off prevention. It's like, well, we don't know that it's not super harmful, so we're going to try to avoid it because there's no proof that it's not harmful. So
thank you. That is really helpful to like identify those. And I have a few, like my head is like spinning with questions right now. My first question is, okay, so each of these are identified individually, but let's take the TV, for example. You have probably a smart radio frequency or the radio frequency coupled with then the magnetic field. Does that amplify it then when these are put together, or is it just kind of all the same when you're doing a reading?
I think, I mean, in terms of our exposure, yes, we're getting hit with a lot more non-native EMFs than if it were just one single isolated field. But, you know, in general, I do want to step back to magnetic fields really quick. Magnetic fields are going to drop off with distance. Actually, all of these are going to drop off with distance, magnetic fields especially. So the two that are going to spread the farthest are going to be radio frequencies and electric field, as magnetic field drop off with distance much quicker. And with something like that, it's like, okay, well, that's why we would want to unplug the device when not in use, because then we're not getting exposed to any of those things unless we're using the TV. And in that case, there are things we can do. So I don't know if we want to jump into that. I'm kind of going ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, you want to make sure that you find a TV that has a setting that allows you to turn off the signal so that you can hardwire your TV in. You want to probably have somebody come out to your house and help you hardwire your internet in so that you're not having to use Wi-Fi and be exposed to the radio frequencies. And then you just plug your computer in with a cord, and now you're getting faster and more reliable internet service. Your calls aren't going to drop when you're on Zoom meetings, and you're not going to get exposed to the radio frequencies anymore, as long as you have the settings off on your computer. And same thing with your TV. So if your TV is hardwired in and you're only watching it, only plugging it in when you're watching it, then you're only going to be getting exposed to maybe an electric field, but probably not. You're not sitting that close. I'm not really too worried, unless that's like something that's behind your head or like really close. Again, I'm not too concerned about the electric field at that point. But you do need to make sure that the TV is actually, the signal can be turned off and it can be hardwired in. So that's one thing you can do.
Cool. Well, I just have to know. I'm speaking, just thinking in the context of the majority of the clients that I have and in my coaching space, and we constantly come up against creating a better sleep routine and getting like better rest. So I'm thinking about the bedroom. What are your suggestions for the bedroom?
I was just thinking that, and then you were talking about TVs. I'm like, people live with TVs in their bedroom now. Like they can't not live that way. Well,
I'm thinking bedroom, cell phone,
everything.
We've got several things going on in the bedroom potentially. So when you go into with your clients, what's that conversation look like?
Yeah. Well, if I'm trying to help someone create a healthier sleep sanctuary, they call it in building biology, it's really trying to find ways that we can totally mitigate our exposure, especially in the sleeping room. That is the most important room in the house. If you can't do anything anywhere else, just focus on your sleep environment, because your sleep environment is where your body rests, it repairs, it heals each night. So TVs, if you have a TV in your room, I would say that you definitely want to be unplugging that at night. At a very minimum, if you're watching it. Something you can do that's kind of cool is you could put it on a timer switch. So you could get a timer switch that plugs into the outlet so that at, 9 o'clock every single night, it just cuts it from the circuit. And so it's essentially unplugging it for you. That's really helpful because it's a no-brainer, and people are like, if they just fall asleep with the TV on or whatever that might look like, then at least it's turning it off. However, that's not the only issue, because there's a lot of blue light coming from our TVs, and that should be avoided at all costs after sunset. The blue light from our screens is signaling to our body that it's noon, and it's messing up our circadian rhythm. It is screwing up our hormones. It is impacting our gut health. I mean, it's impacting everything in our biology to be looking at the screen, seeing the blue light after nature has already said there is no more blue light and it's time to go into more of a higher infrared, at sunset to dark. So for those of you who watch TV at night, I would say at very minimum, you need to be wearing blue light blocking glasses, and be careful. If they don't have a red lens or an orange lens, they're not actually working. You want to make sure the blue light blocking glasses you're using are either a yellow lens that you can use during the day or the orange in like the evening, or red at like later in the night.
Wow.
I love that. Well, really what I'm hearing is no TV, but I know that we have to start somewhere. So some of these small, or that would potentially be best, like removing it from that space if possible. And at the end of the day, we're human and we have our habits. So there's still small things that we can do to make it better.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to say I never watch TV in bed. Like,
that's
I just want everyone to know too that it's totally realistic to watch TV every once in a while when you're in bed. But I mean, we don't have a TV in our room specifically, but we use our laptop and we have a software on it called Iris that turns the screen orange. We just gotten used to what that looks like. Because that's just like the price we pay to watch TV after dark, but then we don't have to wear the glasses, which is really nice. And we hardwire our laptop in, so it's, we turn off the Wi-Fi. The only thing we're getting exposed to is magnetic field. So we just make sure that we don't have the laptop on our body at that point, because like I said, the magnetic field actually increases or decreases with distance. So we put it like on the end of the bed, so it's farther away from us. I mean, we're probably still getting exposed to a little bit, but that's a better way to do it, and to still be watching TV in bed and whatever, having a hang.
Yeah, of course. That is so interesting. I feel like, the sleep sanctuary conversation, I think we all are just glued to our devices. And so having that space where you are more intentional about these decisions and things that you can do. And then, of course, being a human and not being perfect is totally fine as well. Bouncing back to what you said about dirty electricity and relating it to solar, I think this opens a conversation of when does sustainability become actually detrimental to health and vice versa. So like solar, is a great renewable energy source and something that is free from the earth. But I hear you saying that can actually emit some negative fields. So talk to me, I guess, about that, of when do we choose, or how do we choose sustainable options, but then also prioritize human health as well?
Yeah. So with solar specifically, when we are transforming one power energy into another power energy, that's when we're getting that dirty electricity. There are and have been tested some cleaner inverters. So there are better, more cleaner, sustainable options. But again, I don't think that that's very widely talked about. And there's still a lot of testing that I think needs to be done from building biologists too, to, actually get these products, test them to confirm. And it's not always easy to do that because companies aren't going to just let you come in and test it. It's like when somebody's purchasing it, or if someone already has that one on their house, like installed in their home, they can tell which ones are cleaner or not. So the first thing is try to find cleaner inverter. The micro inverters that live in the actual like small cell panels, those can emit a magnetic field as well. So we really have to be careful in the placement of where we're putting the panels, making sure they're not directly above a bedroom. And again, we just don't know how far you need to be away until you're not getting that. And so the safest thing is just avoid putting them close at all. If you could put them off the house, that would be best. Again, I will also say, and this is not on EMF conversation, but in terms of mold and puncturing into your building envelope, that's just another thing that we're installing after the fact. That's probably somebody coming in who has no understanding of your building envelope and is now puncturing in, having no concept of what the assembly is, and how are you making sure that that installation is done without compromising your building envelope, which is the one thing protecting you from the elements. and making sure that your building stays dry. So there's another conversation with that. But, I do think that it's exactly right. We think we're doing something sustainable, but we don't know that it could be causing adverse effects.
I also love opening this conversation because technology is not going away, and I think we're only going to evolve more and more in the evolution of sustainable swaps for resources in general in the home, and there's still some education to make it better. So we can still use the solar panels. Let's just be mindful of where we install them, and that's a great compromise, I think, with the movement of the industry as a whole. What else besides technology in the home specifically, like appliances and such, that do you work with that maybe we're not mindful of when we're thinking about EMF? So is there any like other building materials or anything else that you rehab when you work with your clients?
I don't know. There's so many things. That's the thing. There's just so many things. Electric in-floor heating, really anything that has an electric component. Things we plug. I mean, I've seen people plug different things in to their beds, electric beds, beds that move up and down. Kind of going back to the sleep sanctuary thing. And when I post about this, people go crazy. But the clocks, the circadian alarm clocks, people love them and they're touted for health. But not only are you plugging that in right behind your bed, so you're getting an electric field from it, and it might have a smart function in it, and it's putting like a really high level of blue light. I think, I mean, I don't know. It depends on which one. They start more warm and then go more blue. But, that's not seeing the sunrise first thing in the morning. So again, we're kind of messing up our body's clock because it's not natural light frequency. And that's what we need to be seeing first thing every morning in order for literally every single one of our biological processes.
Actually, I have one of those. I think I'm like talking about it because I'm like, this is so great. It actually aligns my circadian rhythms, and that's apparently
we always
wrong.
mean well. All of these technological enhancements are always in the best interest of making daily life easier.
Exactly.
So it's not going away, which is why this conversation is important, because it's just the education bit too. And you're not going to be able to fix it all, but can you pick one or two things? I think, every episode we're constantly this is what you do for a living, but if you can go back when you first started, it's like when you peel back the cloth, when you go down the rabbit hole, you spend a good chunk of time thinking the entire world is trying to kill you. Just everything. And so it's like, how do you take such a vast topic and it's like there's so much here, and not get overwhelmed to the point where you don't do anything at all, and be confident that just like a few small things can make a huge difference.
Oh my gosh. And I relate to that more than anything, because the first 2 years of my journey, even working, in awakening spaces, I was going down this sick, toxic mindset, this sick, toxic loop, to the point where I made myself sick again. And I had to go through nervous system programs to realign. And what it really comes down to, and what I really try to teach now, is how can we build and create homes that are as close to nature as possible. And it's like almost really just going back to the basics. Like if you see some sort of gizmo or gadget that's like claiming health or like aligning your circadian rhythm, I mean, if it's a device, it's not nature. Just going outside is free and will actually do so much better for our health. And so I've been trying to push that, because that's the one thing that's helped me finally heal, I think. I mean, we're always healing. I'm not healed, but like that is definitely the one thing that's made the biggest improvement for me, is just that learning to reconnect with the foundations and nature.
Well, I think that's a good pivot too, of like what resources and what recommendations do you have amongst like swapping things out, maybe turning things off, spending time outside? Is there anything that you would suggest to maybe just the beginner, someone who's new to this topic and wants to make a change? Where would you start?
Yeah. So I would definitely start and try to see, well, first I would start with downloading the Circadian app. I think it's just called Circadian app. and it's going to go into all the science with resources on why seeing the sun at different times of the day is important and what it actually does for your health. And that's really cool, and what really helped ground me into why it's important to go outside. And instead of, sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, I'm busy, I just gotta finish this email. And it's like, well, no, this serves a purpose to just step outside right now. So download that app, and it tells you what time the sun rises and sets, and what the different frequencies are at different times of day in your location. And I would try to just follow that in terms of like getting outside as much as you can, and really putting your feet on the earth, and really blocking that blue light after night or after dark. And so, again, that's really being conscious and mindful of your cell phone, of your screen time, of your computers. And I would say, like, at a very minimum, you will see improvements to your health if you can really be strict about that for like probably a month. Like, give yourself 30 days, do a 30-day challenge, just try to get outside, get your light environment right, turn the lights off in your house at night, get some blue light blocking bulbs. I have 10% off at blockbluelight.com. I think it might be like Awakening is the code, or you can go to my website. But there's other companies that do it too. That's just the one I really like. And just start like training your body and to get back to the rhythms of nature and what nature intended. There's so many things we can do, but that is really, I think, the biggest bang for your buck. Yeah. The one other thing I'll say is really just turning off your Wi-Fi at night. I think that's a common one, but a lot of people aren't doing that yet. So I'd say definitely make sure you're being conscious about that.
What about EMF blockers? Where are we getting ripped off, and where is there obviously better companies than others, or what's your opinion?
Well, first we need to know what EMF are we blocking, and we need to understand what does it block. And we also have to remember that because it blocks, it actually reflects. Okay. So sometimes if we're using a shielding material, for instance, like the EMF blocking blanket, for instance, we have that on our lap. Yeah, it's blocking, it's shielding it from going below the blanket, but it could be reflecting it back up at us and more and higher level. So, there's times where I think that those things can be valuable. And I do, like the EMF shielding blanket for certain things, or wearing like a hoodie or something if you're on an airplane. But you just have to really be careful because unless you have a professional meter, you don't know if it's actually reflecting back more at you. You don't actually know if it's even blocking anything. I had a client who had a blanket and was washing it, and it wasn't even doing anything anymore because the tag actually said not to wash it. But we don't read, like, of course, how she didn't know. And so you spend, I don't know, $200 on something, and then that happens. So you don't know if it's still working. That's the tricky thing with EMFs, because they are invisible. Most of us can't feel them unless you are one of the sensitive ones who can. You just don't really know. So I think unless you're hardwiring something in, or finding a way to turn something off, like automatically, like a timer switch, or plug something in, those are the kind of gizmos and gadgets that are going to be helpful. Okay. Anything that's like a sticker, a pendant, they say they harmonize, but that doesn't change the level on the meter. So whether it's actually doing anything influential or not, it's really hard to know. And I think it's sort of like, I use this analogy a lot that my mentor Orem had said once, but it's, if there's a cigarette lit in the other room, are you going to get an air purifier and put it next to you and capture all the smoke, or are you going to go find the cigarette and put it out? And with those pendants, it's the same thing. You have the pendant on, but there's still cigarette smoke all around you. And so it's like, how do we really know? So
good piece of reflection too. I'm seeing a trend where there's more awareness, I think, of this topic, and there's a lot of marketing and propaganda into some of the things that may not be as impactful as we're led to believe. So I'm hearing that at the end of the day, doing things like shutting things off, hardwiring things, distancing yourself is going to be a more impactful approach to mitigating some of the exposure.
Yeah.
And to confirm, you said that obviously we talked about circadian rhythm, but what other health effects on a physical level are happening when we have excess EMF exposure? I read a book called EMFs, and it went deep into the science. And if I can remember correctly, it was talking about like affecting on the cellular level, and like that sort of mutation with this on the cellular level can lead to potential like cancer or other like more physical diseases. So is that something that you've seen in terms of physical health, I guess, issues coming from EMF, or what, or is circadian rhythm kind of the biggest thing that is the baseline that affects more hormonal other issues?
Well, like when we talked about earlier, you were like, well, is there like a balance, right? So when we expose ourselves to more of nature's healing frequencies, that's going to be doing all these good things for us. In contrast, when we are exposing ourselves to non-native EMFs, one of the biggest things that was found was Dr. Martin Paul did some research on voltage gated calcium channels. And so he found that in the presence of radio frequencies, it opens up our voltage gated calcium channels, which essentially allows calcium to flood our cells. And when calcium floods our cells, it just creates a lot of downstream effects. It's kind of like, now we have one thing that's like turning our clock on and getting us right, and I have one thing that's like, but this is like opening this up, and now we're trying to fight this. And so that can manifest depending on your genetics, depending on your other health issues. Like that can manifest as so many different things. I've seen people who have been exposed to I have a dear friend who had lived in a home with extremely high levels of magnetic fields that at one point, I think in her late 20s, she finally got to a point she became so sensitive that if someone even had a cell phone on near her, she like couldn't. She felt like she was being stabbed all over her body. Wow. So that's like electro hypersensitivity, EHS is what that's called. So like that's a very prolonged exposure over a long period of time. And, why her, not her family members, I don't know. And does mold play a role in all these other toxins that we're exposed to? And then we get into the conversation of like our toxic bucket and how filled is it? By making small changes to our everything that we are in contact with, the water we're drinking, the air that we're breathing, the clothes that we're wearing, the personal care products, all of those things are going to make a dent into just how we feel overall. And I think that electromagnetic radiation is just one drop in the bucket of our overall exposure. And depending on how high our total body burden is, it might impact us more one way or another, depending on who we are and how we live.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think we've talked a lot about how every body is truly unique, and some person's sensitivity level can really differentiate and change the effects of that. So thank you for going over that a little bit more in detail. We just have a few more questions before we'll wrap up into our monthly motivation section, but I want to talk more about what does working with you look like, and what do those in-home visits look like in your process, and how can people interact with you and just talk a little bit more about your day-to-day working in this field.
Yeah. So I actually don't do a lot of in-home visits anymore. Occasionally I'll do an EMF evaluation if someone asks and they're local in Denver. If you're not local in Denver and you want somebody to come in, I'm happy to share a recommendation for someone local to you. You can also go to the Building Biology Institute's website and actually find an expert there, find someone local to you. But yeah, if someone's local, I'll do an in-house assessment. Otherwise, I'm really focusing on the prevention in people who are doing full renovations or new builds. How can we actually create a home that is going to bring us closer to nature? And how can we be inside of our homes and not be so cut off from the outside? And I've kind of came full circle to this place just from my own experience and realizing and studying quantum biology, which is the circadian health route, and realize the importance of that and how that really, we need more of that just as much as we need less of what's cutting us off. And so I really help people during a renovation or a new build find ways that they can do that and how they can still, just minimize their risk, not only on an EMF perspective, but mold toxicity, bacteria, and chemical toxicity as well.
Wow, that's amazing. We have talked a lot about just that integration of nature into the home, blurring the lines of indoor and outdoor living, and that's super cool that there's like I'm assuming that that work for you includes the energetics of like grounding the home. Is that correct? Or
Not as much. That's sort of my next thing I'm going to dabble in is I kind of want to get maybe into like feng shui or the energy piece of it. But that for me really looks like our lighting systems, our electrical systems, getting into a lot of that component as well. And it can look different for everybody. I meet people exactly where they're at. You don't have to live in like a straw hut to have that natural home. I think I love working in like plasters and that kind of stuff and natural materials. And those also, we could go on a whole topic of that because they provide so many benefits in terms of the negative ions in the home. But we could go into that later. But just finding ways that people can be where they're at, but also be more connected to nature in their home.
I love that. I think we're guilty. I've done not a whole lot of travel, but enough to know that there are other cultures that are a little bit better about bringing the outside inside, and it's less of a, I feel like much of our architecture here is you're either inside with no greenery and no sight of the outdoor space, or you're completely immersed in nature and there's nothing to merge the two together. That's really cool. I see a growing demand for more spaces like that as we evolve, as we educate ourselves in topics like EMF, but also just the way that technology is moving. We're getting, it's the polarization. So as we continue to move further and further away from our North Star, I think we're gonna get pulled back, and that's part of your work, is pulling people back.
Yeah, I had to pull myself back, and I think that the things that I see the most is that our lives are just so complicated and so stressful today, and like everything's got to be so smart, and we have to be so connected, and it is just not. It's disconnecting us from ourselves and from nature, and so I really want. That's sort of my mission, is like how I can help people reconnect with themselves, with nature through their built environment.
I love that so much. The last EMF kind of related question we have today was just addressing kind of how we, as people who live in apartments and condos and shared spaces, how does that impact this conversation about electromagnetics in the entire building? Or like, I've had people tell me, well, you can't really do anything because if you live in an apartment building, because someone else's Wi-Fi could affect you. Like, is that true, or what can we do?
Yeah, to a degree, it's going to be more challenging in an apartment or condo building because, you have a lot less control. But I would definitely start with the basics, like, how's your relationship with the cell phone? Again, we're going to go back to that. First things first. If you're already doing all of that and you're like, I have got all the low-hanging fruit, then I would say have an electromagnetic radiation specialist come in and see take some measurements and see what are you actually getting exposed to, because you have no idea. You're just assuming that your neighbor's Wi-Fi. You have no idea. It might not. And if it is, then there are some creative solutions that maybe you can come up with. And really, again, the biggest is getting your sleeping space as clean as it possibly can. And so there are different things, like there's bed canopies, depending on what you're getting exposed to. I think there's things that can be done, but it is going to be more challenging. And I think it's best to just do readings to know what those things are. Because I think a lot of times you say a blanket statement and everyone's like, I need to go get a bed canopy. Or and I get nervous doing that because it's like, well, not necessarily. And that could also, again, with the shielding stuff, right? Let's see what we're working with first.
I'm also hearing it's like we don't need to fix our technology problem with another piece of technology. There's so much we can do just in the removal or the distancing from, or just kind of taking away the low-hanging fruit, as you mentioned, before you dive into the extra things. And then I'm hearing like before you go invest, to talk to a specialist so that you feel confident your investment is in the right place.
Yeah, totally. And just that low-hanging fruit, get rid of that first, and also get outside as much as possible.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we have been wrapping up our episodes with a monthly motivation where we just ask a few kind of like rapid fire questions. So feel free to like keep it short and sweet or like go in as much as you want. But the first question is, what's one invigorating conversation you've had recently? I'll kick it to Makayla to start.
Ooh, I think recently, I think it goes perfect with our topic today, is the emphasis on spending time outside. So we've recently scheduled a weekly early morning hike, 2 to 3 hour hike, where we're meeting up with each other, gonna walk around either with our dogs or without our dogs, just to be intentional about the removal. It's so easy to let your schedule fill up and then we'll get to it, or you're too busy to do it, versus prioritizing it. I find that when I prioritize the hike, the rest of my week is better. I could be doing the same amount of stuff. It just feels completely different because I chose to do the thing that makes me feel good. So what about you, Haley?
I don't even remember where this conversation took place, but I had a conversation recently that was really just about like realigning with the soul and finding that line between like your best self and your whole self, your highest self. And I think so much of this conversation, like you're saying, like we live these stressful lives and you have to do everything to be perfect and like no one can mess up or anything like that. And I think this conversation just was a really nice eye opener for me, where we were like, let's just take these like strides towards embodying more of the whole self. And what does that look like? What does that feel like in the body? So that was a really special conversation for me recently.
I love that. I feel like that's the same conversation I was having. And just that, like, just this weekend, I was talking to my best friend who, you know, her and I are on different paths in terms of like health and wellness and stuff. And she kind of like is my friend that gets me back out of my shell and back to who I am after being sick and after spending years and years and years of going down this like toxin rabbit hole. Like, she's the person I come back to who's just like, love her to death, drinking tap water. I'm trying to tell her not to, but it's also like a reminder to me of like, whoo, we're gonna be okay. And like life isn't just about this, you know, removing and avoiding and removing and avoiding. It's, you know, and we can still love people no matter what, and we can still get along with people if they're not on the same path. And just a reminder to just not beat ourselves up and like to let the avoidance of toxins stress us out so much that we just like we feel defeated
and the shell of yourself.
Totally. We talk about that a lot, of like making this approachable and easy. I love the low-hanging fruit idea. Cool. So that was our first question. Our second question is, what's something you've read recently, or what are you currently reading? I am reading too many books right now. I have like a thing where I'll start like an audiobook and then like I'll get a, you know, I'll be like, I'm ready for something else. And so I'm reading too many books right now. But the one that has been good, and I think I talked about this in the past like few episodes, but I'm reading a fantasy series right now called Fourth Wing. And are you reading the same thing?
I just finished that one.
Okay. I'm on Iron Flame, like the second one, and I'm almost done with it. And it's just so out of my like normal self-help realm. And it's been super refreshing to like have this new like sexy, fun like book to like escape to in a way. It like is a fun new way to like connect with content that's not visually stimulating. So anyway, that is me once again talking about the Fourth Wing Empyrean series. What about you guys?
Go ahead.
I mean, I've been just that. I'm always reading like self-development books, and I finally got into all of the Sarah J. Maasverse, like her ACOTAR series. I'm on Crescent City now, and I've been really loving Audible because now I can just like listen to books that kind of just like let me dip out of my like work, stress, and kind of just like go into this own little world. That's such a nice balance.
Yeah.
Like when I'm driving in the car. And so I'm a huge fan.
I'm gonna dip into some fantasy, maybe on the next episode.
Yeah.
I hope I have done that. I am listening to The Holographic Universe, so it's just a book about them trying to prove the holographic theory, about that we're a little more constructed in our mind than we're led to believe. So there's a lot in there. It talks about quantum physics and aliens and lots of fun stuff. So that's what I'm reading.
I love that. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah.
I'll be reading that the next time. We'll swap books.
Good.
What's one non-toxic swap you're excited to make or you're currently working on in your home or in your lifestyle?
I do feel like it's taken me, like, I'll start by saying it's taken like 6 years to totally swap everything out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. One thing I'm really working on and want to be better about is clothing. And I just switched all my underwear. Can't even remember what the brand was, or I would totally tell you. But like just really being conscious about that. And because our clothing is a whole nother animal and it's so close to our body. And yeah, you're so good with all that and educating on that.
About the clothing.
Yeah.
To me, it's like if we're sitting on a perfectly organic linen chair, but you're sitting in polyester underwear,
Exactly.
like what?
I know.
It's funny you say that because like intimates were my non-toxic in our last episode. So that I just did the same thing. Socks, underwear, bras, all of it. It's necessary, I think, is the first thing to clothing,
Yeah.
So yeah.
What about you, Haley?
Oh, I just got married a few weeks ago, so I have not really been in the non-toxic space yet. I've been just maybe more decluttering, reselling. So that I guess is removing unnecessary items from my home. I'm going to count that as a quote unquote toxic thing this week because I've been a little busy. But decluttering from the home, removing things that are no longer serving me. One thing that drives my husband insane is I will just remove things if I know we're not going to keep them. So like I have 2 chairs where I'm like, we're not keeping these chairs like in our end design like for the space. And I will list them on Facebook Marketplace. And so he always will just get kind of mad, like, I use that chair and I need that chair right now. But I really am kind of in the energetics of like, if you are not finding like a true value in it, like please remove it from your home. And that is a little bit of toxic. There is like some energetic toxicity, I guess, there of just like holding on to things that we don't need. I grew up with a grandma who was extremely like a really bad hoarder. And so I think that I'm like almost the complete opposite in that way, where like I'm almost too minimalistic, where I get rid of things too quickly sometimes. But yeah, getting rid of things in my home is kind of what I'm working on as my toxic, non-toxic swap.
I love that.
Yeah, same. I've been confidently consistent with making like homemade Clorox wipes to DIY, like wipe down my kitchen and my bathroom. So it's just like a really simple vinegar, alcohol, essential oil mixture. You roll up the rags, you stick them in a jar, and it's just nice to have something at the end of the night that smells fresh. And, it's a little more than soap and water, but not quite the Lysol spray from before.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy.
It's easy, yeah, for sure.
Love that. Ashley, where can people connect with you? How can you best serve our audience, and how do you want people to connect with you?
Yeah. You can always find me on Instagram and send a DM. I am good about answering my DMs there. You can schedule a free 20-minute call to connect if you're interested in learning more about services or how I might be able to support you. You can send me an email through my website if you'd like. But yeah, it's always easy to come find me at Awakening Spaces on Instagram.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here. This was so amazing to talk with you and learn more about this. We would love to do a second episode diving more into the mold side of things. So if you're listening to this, keep an eye out, ear out for that episode as well. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Soulful Sustainable Living with Haley and Makayla. We truly feel so grateful that you're here and listen to today's episode. We would love to connect with you further at Soulful Sustainable Living on Instagram. And if you have someone that we should be talking to or you would like to come on our podcast, please reach out to us at info@soulfulsustainableliving.com. We appreciate you. Take care of yourself today. Always sending you love and peace.